Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and welcome, ladies and
everybody.
gentlemen. This is a very rainy afternoon here in Ho Chi Minh City. And my name is Phi, the trade specialist for the Department for International Trade in Ho Chi Minh City. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon. And I would like to say thank you for joining us today for this webinar on UK AI for digital transformation. I think a topic that takes much of the spotlight these days. And if you have any questions, please type them into the question box in the Zoom control panel. Using the question box will help us manage questions better. If you feel like a questions apply to you, please use the upvote function by clicking the thumbs up button. Using both the Q&A box and the upvote function will help us reach a question faster and will help answer more of your concerns. We will also have time for questions at the end of the webinars. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite our Deputy Consul General and Head of Trade and Investment at the British Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City to come forward and begin our webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sam Wood.
Thanks very much, Phi. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Can I just check everyone can hear me properly? Maybe a thumbs up.
Perfect.
Brilliant. That's great. Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to introduce the session, and fantastic also to see the numbers of you that have taken the time to join. It looks like we're on about 65 participants, so that's a fantastic turnout for what I think will be really fascinating discussion. I promise not to take up too much time because very keen that we have as much time as possible to hear from our experts. But just a few words of thanks really from me. So first of all, thanks to all of our speakers. Really appreciate the time you've given up to be involved today. So first of all to Dr. Chris Moore from the Department of International Trade, and also Dr. Nguyen Nguyen, the CEO of Trusting Social, but also to our panelists, Jay Najal, Ant Murphy, John Bourbon and Steve Ackland. Really pleased that you've taken the time to join today, and grateful that you've for your interest. So just a quick word on me really and why I'm talking to you. So as Phi introduced me, I'm Sam Wood, the Deputy Consul General at the Consulate here in Ho Chi Minh City, but I also head up the Department for International Trade team here, working closely with counterparts in the embassy in Hanoi. Now our role as DIT here in Vietnam is to work obviously very closely with companies that are already based here, but also to spend time supporting UK firms that are looking for opportunities here and in the wider region. Ultimately, we prioritise boosting the profile of UK companies here and strengthening the trade and investment offer. And really with that objective in mind, Vietnam is a pretty exceptional place to be. I've only been here for a relatively short time, but it's been extremely obvious just how dynamic Vietnam is, and nowhere really is that more apparent than in the tech scene. Vietnam has one of the fastest growing tech landscapes in Asia, and last year overtook even Singapore in terms of the volume of investment in the tech startup scene. And the digital economy here is now the second fastest growing in the whole of ASEAN. Now this of course aligns quite neatly with the UK's strengths. We are a world leader across the innovative application of tech, and that really translates to all of our most successful sectors, whether that's cybersecurity or healthcare or in financial services. And focusing on the topic that we'll be talking about today, artificial intelligence, obviously the UK has played a leading and pivotal role in the development of AI, all the way through really from Alan Turing's work to lay the foundations of computer science and machine learning, through to lots of innovative modern commercial applications of AI. So it's very exciting to have a range of panelists today that can talk about their own experiences with that. We also have in the UK one of the most comprehensive AI strategies via our AI sector deal, which was developed by the UK Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department, which has enabled both extensive funding for the sector, both private and public, but also significant investment in R&D. And increasingly, this feels very relevant to the landscape here in Vietnam. AI has started to see sort of similar exciting growth in recent years, with lots and lots of companies here looking to AI as a more effective way of expediting internal processes and also improving efficiencies. So today feels very relevant and very timely. And we are very, very grateful to everyone for joining and giving their time to explore the subjects in a bit more detail. Just a quick word on other things that are going on. If, as I suspect is the case, you want some more after today's webinar, this is the perfect time. There's lots of virtual activity going on for London Tech Week, and all of it is free. So please do take a look at their website and engage with some of the other activity that's going on. I'd also encourage you all to stay in touch with us here in Vietnam. You can find us across all the social medias at UK and Vietnam. So let me just wrap up by saying finally a big thank you to Phi, our tech sector lead, who you heard from just a moment ago. Also Giang, our financial services lead in Hanoi, and also Toby from the British Chamber of Commerce, who've really held the pen on organising today and made it all possible. So very, very grateful to the three of you. So I think that's plenty from me, really. Very keen that we get into the meat of the discussion. So I will hand over back to Phi, I think, and then on to our first speaker. But once again, a huge thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to those of you that have taken the time to join, and also wishing everyone in Vietnam a very happy national holiday for tomorrow. Right. Xin chào Tan, come on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for your very kind word. Moving along, it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Chris Moore, to speak about UK AI landscape. Dr. Chris Moore is a tech expert at the Department for International Trade, working in technology and smart cities team. Dr. Chris Moore also engaged with the development of the UK's government's AI sector deal, working closely with the UK's Office for AI, and leading the government's AI and Data Grant Challenge at the Department for International Trade. With his over 25 years of experience in the tech industry, Dr. Chris Moore helps tech companies to establish a presence in the UK and UK tech companies to collaborate overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Chris Moore, dialing in from London.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here talking to you about artificial intelligence to Vietnam. I'm just going to share my screen and bring the presentation up. I hope everybody can see that satisfactorily. So as Phi said, my role in today's discussion is to really inform you a little bit more about what is happening in artificial intelligence in the UK and why that might be interesting to you as a Vietnamese organization. So as Sam said in the introduction, the artificial intelligence is very, very important for the UK market. But let's look at the broader UK landscape to start with. As you can see from these headlines about the UK tech industry, clearly the tech sector is very, very important to the whole of the economy. And as in Vietnam, the tech sector in the UK is growing much, much faster than the rest of the economy. And I think in a post-COVID environment, that's going to accelerate even further as more and more businesses and organizations are running their activities entirely online. In the UK, we have seen also a very significant growth in venture capital. And in fact, the UK has more venture capital than any other country in Europe, with more than £10 billion in 2019. And one of the reasons that this is particularly significant, I think, today is a lot of that VC investment is going into technology companies, and particularly artificial intelligence and data analytics, data science companies. So as a consequence of this, we see more IPOs, initial public offerings, and more unicorns created in the UK than anywhere else in Europe. And therefore, we can say that AI and data analytics are really driving this digital transformation in the UK. But let's turn to artificial intelligence specifically. And there are many reports that look at the significance of AI. And in particular, there was a study that was carried out by Accenture, which said that more than £650 billion is going to be added to the UK's economy by 2035. And one of the reasons why AI is so important is that it touches every single sector. And I don't think there are any examples of sectors where you can say, no, AI is not going to be important for us. Be it from retail to financial services to healthcare to security, artificial intelligence is really, really important. Now, in the UK, we see many early stage AI companies and small and medium-sized businesses that have been particularly successful. And later on in today's presentation, you will hear from some of those UK small and medium-sized businesses that are operating in artificial intelligence. But if you're interested in finding out more about the AI landscape, I would recommend these two reports, which illustrate the significance of the AI sector in the UK. Depending on your definition of AI, there's somewhere around 1,000 AI companies in the UK. So it's a very, very strong base of artificial intelligence expertise. And we see a new generation of internationally successful AI scale-ups. So clearly there are some companies that you may have heard of, companies like DeepMind that have gone through successful exits, but others such as Benevolent AI and healthcare are now showing the way for the next wave of AI companies. And much of this is based around specific clusters in the UK, often linked to internationally recognized universities, so places like Cambridge and Edinburgh, and of course in London. But let's have a look at how the UK compares to other markets. So already I mentioned the significant number of AI companies. Now, in this report from MMC Ventures, a particular definition was used, which showed that there were around 470 or more AI early stage companies in the UK, which is more than France and Germany combined. So you can see that the UK is very much a powerhouse of AI expertise. But of course, there are many measures, and you may say, well, how does the UK compare to the rest of the world? And arguably, by many analysts, the US and China are the top two locations for artificial intelligence. But after that, I think the UK is often considered to be number 3. And you can see from this intensity map, looking at a different measure here, the number of AI academic papers that are produced. And this comes from the Artificial Intelligence Index, which is published every year. Now, to look at a bit more detail about what the UK government is doing to support the AI sector, in 2018, there was a sector deal that was announced, and this was a close to £1 billion of investment to do a number of things. And you can see these highlighted in the slide. Firstly, to improve the access to data. So as a bank or a large retail group, if you're looking to access data and to apply artificial intelligence tools, then the creation of data trusts and a Centre for Data Ethics is really trying to make that journey much easier for companies. But of course, the other thing that's very important about the UK is the talent pool. And in fact, again, the AI sector deal was focusing very particularly on trying to increase the skills base in the UK. So for instance, creating more than 200 PhD places in artificial intelligence every year for the next 5 years. Equally well, supporting R&D. And already you heard Sam mention the Alan Turing and the institute named after him. The Alan Turing Institute is a national institute for artificial intelligence and data science. And also, the government has tried hard to help with the uptake, help companies and organizations to use artificial intelligence. So creating an office for AI and also an AI council. Now, I mentioned Alan Turing a moment ago. Here's a little bit more information. This is, as I said, a national facility for AI and data science. They have partnerships with a number of key universities across the country, but also strategic partnerships with organizations like HSBC and Intel, but many other partnerships with other large companies that there's not sufficient space to talk about today. But suffice to say that the Turing Institute is a key center for AI in the UK. Now, one of the areas that, one of the ways that UK government has tried to strengthen the R&D base in the UK for artificial intelligence and other areas of tech is the creation of an industrial strategy challenge fund. So this is a funding source for companies that are tackling some of the world's biggest problems. So for instance, looking at the application of AI, particularly in areas like computer vision in transforming food production, looking at how that plays out also for self-driving cars. And in particular, two other things to highlight. Firstly, a grand challenge, which has even more funding available to support tech development, which is focused very much on the use of AI for healthcare. And perhaps for this audience, more relevant, an initiative in next generation services, which is looking at how AI plays into sectors like insurance and legal and financial services more broadly. Now, I mentioned, of course, a little bit about some of the early stage companies in the UK. There are accelerators which support the growth of AI companies, for instance, Entrepreneur First. And here's just an example of a company called Magic Pony Technology that started in that accelerator, grew significantly, left the accelerator, and then was acquired by Twitter for $150 million. So you can see that there are some great early stage companies that are very successful in the UK. Equally well, there are other programs that support scale-ups, there are seed funds, and in particular, this new accelerator, which is in Scotland, which supports AI and blockchain, and supported by Wyra, is a great source of new companies as well. Now, I just wanted to move on quickly and mention very briefly a few words about some of the companies that are in the UK working in the artificial intelligence space as it pertains particularly to financial services. However, I'm not going to spend very much time on this section because we're very privileged to have 4 great participants who will be on the panel later. So I'm just going to give just a quick snapshot on some companies. So clearly in financial services, the whole concept of know your customer is very important. Shifty Pro is a UK-based company that has customers right across the globe, and you can see is providing solutions that help with the verification of identity. In a similar space is but perhaps looking a little bit more on the aspects of security, is another UK company called Onfido. They provide a verification platform which, as you can see from the image here, takes data from IDs or other forms of biometrics that can be verified in real time. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about BluePrism, but I'm not, because we have Jay from BluePrism who will be talking in a lot more detail later on. So just to say that BluePrism provides solutions in RPA, but Jay, I'm sure, will tell you a lot more about that later on. And another company, Celoton, which looks at machine learning as it applies to documentation, and clearly in the financial services industry, organizations will receive documents and input from a variety of different sources, and finding a method to assess these and compare them, derive data from them is an important part of the process. And finally, in this section, I also wanted to highlight that the UK is very strong in technology associated with chatbots and virtual assistants. And here is an example Creative Virtual, which has provided chatbot and virtual assistant solutions across a number of different industries, as you can see. And this again highlights the significance of the fact that artificial intelligence is not limited to just one or two verticals, but really will address issues and opportunities across a very broad range of sectors. And we should not forget also that in this time well, in these unusual times, shall we say, that AI has also been used very effectively in the fight against COVID-19. In the UK, there is an app which is called the Zoe app, which has been developed with help from government and also from a number of universities. And this is tracking essentially how people are feeling, whether they have acquired COVID symptoms in real time. And this is used by, I think, more than 4 million people currently. Equally well, companies like DeepMind, that I mentioned earlier, and Benevolent AI have been involved in looking at understanding the mode of action of the virus, and also looking at improving routes and improving the speed at which drugs can be identified that can be used to combat COVID-19 as well. And finally, in this section, just to say that equally well, the UK's National Health Service has established an AI laboratory. This is still work in progress, but it's really looking at driving digital transformation in healthcare using AI and data analytics. Now, as you heard Sam say in the beginning, this week or the next 2 weeks are very important in the UK's tech calendar, as London Tech Week will be taking place. The AI Summit, as illustrated in this slide, is also part of the London Tech Week activities. But to just focus a bit more on AI specifically, here are a number of trade shows that take place from now through to next summer that cover different aspects. So if you are interested to come and take a look at what's going on in the UK, I would highly recommend any of these trade shows. And in particular, we can give you more information and detail about which trade shows may be most appropriate for you. And those are my contact details if you need them. And otherwise, that concludes my part of the presentation.
Many thanks to Dr. Chrismore. We will have a time to ask Dr. Chrismore more questions in the end of the webinars. And now the upcoming presentation will feature Dr. Minh Anh Nguyen, the CEO and founder of Trusting Social to represent Vietnam. Me personally, I would like to express my most sincere appreciation to him for participating in the webinar. Dr. Minh Anh Nguyen, upon earning his PhD in economics from Rice University in the US, he joined Barclays Global Decision Science team in New York, where he led and developed various analytical models for credit risk, fraud risk, collection and recovery for Barclays retail banking portfolios across Africa, Europe, and America, with the goal to help with invisible customers access the financial system. Trusting Social brings together innovations and unique data insights to create new markets for the billions of unbanked and the underbanked. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Minh Anh Nguyen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. We'll start from there. Okay, so I'd like to spend a couple of minutes to talk about Trusting Social, which is a fintech AI company in Asia. We focus on delivering financial inclusion for Asian markets. We have about 100 banks and NBFCs across 4 markets. We tie up with major data owners in each of the markets, and we have provide credit score to 1 billion consumers in India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. We also provide other infrastructure for the digital banking industry. And currently we are onboarding about 5 million consumers every month between Vietnam and India. So in Vietnam, we work with probably 80% of all the banks and NBFCs. We provide credit score to about 80 million consumers in the country. Every 1 in 3 consumer loans in Vietnam are underwritten using trusting social credit score. So with that context, I'd like to give some observations about the digital transformation in Vietnam, especially on the financial services. The first observation is that the national digital infrastructure is quite nascent. For example, we don't yet have a centralized identity, digital identity, although it has been under work for several years now. And this is a big challenge for any digital transformation, for banks, for insurance companies, for financial services, and for e-commerce, everybody. This is a big missing piece of the puzzle that in other markets that we're in have been solved quite nicely and quickly. Particularly for financial services, the digital payment in Vietnam is quite well, have longer time to develop, but because of the regulation, it's not yet become the prominent way of payment for Vietnamese. Not comparing to China, but even comparing to India, comparing to the Philippines and Indonesia. Vietnam start earlier, but right now is quite lagging behind. And another challenge with digital transformation in Vietnam is the regulation about the cloud. What is required to be stored in the country, outside the country, it's not very clear. And it's interesting sort of works almost exclusively in financial services. The banks and insurance companies tend to take the more conservative view and basically deploy AI application within their own premise, and that kind of increase the cost of AI and limit the applications. Lastly, the consumer data and privacy regulations, the law are there, but the instructions from the government bodies are not always very clear. And because of that, it is quite challenging for AI companies as well as the big data companies to navigate from time to time. However, in the banking sector, the regulators have been supporting digital payment quite early on. So as a result, Vietnam digital payment ecosystem have about 10 years of development, and there are strong players emerge out of that accommodating environment. But in other sectors, the regulators tend to be much more conservative, let's say compared to the UK, who basically pioneered the model of challenger banks, and then which as a result created neobanks that becomes a role model for every other countries. Banking regulators in Vietnam tend to be much more conservative because of the historical turbulence in the past. There are several financial crises happened in the past that basically shunned the consumer as well as the regulators for quite some time. In particular, there's no new license in lending or banking issued for a long period of time now. There's no neobank policy or regulatory framework yet set in Vietnam. As a result of regulations, the fintech startup ecosystem is quite immature, maybe except for payment ecosystem. And but at the same time, I believe that they can grow a lot more with better or more accommodative regulations. Having said that, though, the banking industry is quite competitive, and due to the competition, they adopt the digital transformation quite quickly. And the COVID-19 and the recently enacted eKYC regulation truly accelerate digital transformation in retail banking, starting with using eKYC for opening bank accounts and so on. So for Tracing Social, we seize this opportunity, and for the last 2 years, we've developed the technology, but only in the last 6 months that we closed very, very fast. So the time window is right there, collide. Basically, it's a double tailwind of the COVID and the regulation, new regulation on the eKYC started December last year. Outside of banking, I see that the digital transformation tend to be quite slow, and I would discuss it a little bit more on the next slide. In particular, AI in digital transformation in Vietnam is much smaller than the UK or the US. Right? The talent pool is small. If today Vietnam has hundreds of thousands of software engineers, the serious AI talent would be, in a few hundreds, definitely less than 1,000. Right? There's no global players setting shops in Vietnam yet, like Amazon, Google, Facebook. Within the local AI companies, Tracing Social is one of the pioneers. Others are mostly coming from the conglomerates, like Vin AI, which comes from Vin Group, Vin Big Data Institute, which comes from Vin Group also, FPT AI, which is a branch of FPT, which is a huge outsourcing, software outsourcing companies. Viettel Cyberspace, which is a research arm of Viettel Telecom, Zalo AI, and the first true AI company in Vietnam is called Arimo, which is acquired by Panasonic, and so very few local players. And the AI market is quite early, and it's simple and generic, like focus on eKYC, computer vision, customer analytics. Very few deep industry-specific AI applications, like in agriculture, in healthcare, in transportation. It's just not there yet. And the Vietnam education system is not catching up yet, has not catch up with the market in terms of educating AI talents. There are few AI master program in AI in Vietnam, which set up recently. But in terms of pumping out a sizable workforce made available to the industry, it's going to be a couple of years down the line. In terms of venture funding in Vietnam, it's still much smaller than the UK, of course. Probably less than $1 billion invested in Vietnam last year for startups, but a very big chunk goes to the payment companies, and for the rest of the ecosystem, especially for AI, it's mostly seed and very few Series A. So Tracing Social is probably the only one, the only AI company that have finished Series B, raising $30 million from Sequoia Capital. But I think in this area, Vietnam is quite behind. And I think the main challenge of the AI startup in Vietnam is combining the shortage of AI talent is the lack of understanding of the industries that they want to serve. Because of that, you know, there are few AI applications that truly deliver value. And before you can deliver value, the adoption will be slow. I think all of that are changing, but it can be faster. So let's take Tracing Social as a case study. I want to make a few points here, right? Building an AI companies in emerging markets is very different. Building an AI company in a small market like Vietnam, it is even more difficult. So Tracing Social from the beginning did not just focus on Vietnam, right? We focus on Asia, and we focus on big countries with big problem. And the problem that we choose was the financial inclusion of banking the underbanked, right? So our mission was enabling universal financial inclusion through digital banking, AI, and big data. But our strategy will be very different, right? So if you're in the UK or in the US, you can be, I would say, a thin layer or specialized AI that go across verticals like chatbots and so on, that you serve different industries and many mid-size or enterprise. In a small market like Vietnam, or in a poor markets like Southeast Asia and South Asia, you have to choose a different strategy. And our strategy is to focus on bringing AI to deliver the end value to our customer, right? And we focus on credit vertical, and we have to build a very deep technology stack. Instead of building just one chatbot and sell it to 1,000 enterprise, we build a stack that have 20 different technologies, right? With the goal that using our stack, AI or not, the banks and financial institutions grasp the value very clearly. They're going to acquire a lot more customers. They're going to reduce their credit risk by 50%, and therefore saving X dollar. So convincing emerging markets to adopt AI applications is difficult until and unless you show very concrete revenue number or cost saving numbers. So Tracing also focus on mass consumers, reaching out to these unbanked consumers through new channels like e-commerce, mobile wallet, SMS. We personalize the products for mass consumer with radically lower cost, right? So the biggest challenge with banking the underbanked is that they don't have a lot of purchasing power. So how do we reduce the cost by 10 times so that we can serve customers who have the monthly income of $300, $500 efficiently? And that's what Tracing Social focuses on. And a very big part of the mass consumers, serving mass consumer, is the risk, especially credit risk and fraud rate is very high. It comes directly from the lack of infrastructure for AI, right? So there's no centralized database for identity. The data on credit history is pretty poor. The regulation on the data sharing, cloud, and so on. All of that combined create a very high cost in serving the mass consumers. And Tracing Social focuses on solving that challenge to the bank. Very quickly, this is an example of the product that we built with a bank. It looks very simple. It's similar to Apple Card, where basically within 3 minutes, you fill in the information, you capture the ID and selfie, and you get a credit card issued, right? Only in 3 minutes. This is the first ever in Vietnam. This is instantly approval, fully automated underwriting, and instant issuance of virtual credit card. This is doable in the UK or in the US because the data infrastructure is very good. In emerging markets like Vietnam, it is very difficult. Let me share with you how difficult it is. Right? To build this, we have to build this technology stack, right? So we have to build our credit insights, credit scoring, and by partnering with telecom operators, e-commerce, and so on, we have to be able to credit score 80 million people. Whereas within the credit bureau population, it's about 20 million people. Right? We have to estimate income from alternative data because the formal employment, it's like less than 20% of the population. Right? So the rest of the population cannot prove their income. Right? And then the fraud is a massive problem in Vietnam because, everybody, can get different IDs, and the ID can be easily tampered. So we have to build that technology. Right? And then we have to build consumer analytics so that we can pre-approve a large base of customers, in case of Vietnam, 20, 30 million customers for different kind of financial products. And then we have to build the channel-specific campaign management capability. It means that within a mobile wallet, we have to be able to segment into 10, 20 different segments and reach out to this segment differently. With SMS channel that can reach out to rural areas, very deep rural areas, we have to build different products and different channels and campaign management to target those audience with the right products for peasants, for people who, let's say, do the farming or raising cats or cows and pigs differently. Right? And then we have to integrate with different distribution channels like mobile wallets, like e-commerce and so on. Then we have to build a whole digital identity and fraud detection stack, which is including selfie ID matching, which is a very peculiar problem for Vietnam, right? Because the ID itself is low resolution, low quality, easily tampered. So we have to build different databases to verify the IDs across different sources. And then we have to build the onboarding platform and portfolio management and so on. So as you can see, at least for us, it's not possible to survive as a standalone, ivory tower kind of AI company. We have nearly 200 people. We have about 60 data scientists, 25 PhDs, the rest are master degrees. But at the end, we cannot just be a deep mind, right? Although we are very much inspired by them. We have to focus on a particular vertical. We have to build a very deep stack to deliver the end result to our clients, our banks. Right? So that's just a quick summary of our view on the digital transformation in Vietnam, the AI landscape in Vietnam, and I have walked you through our own experience of building an AI company in an emerging market with low income and smallish, like Vietnam has about 96 million people. So it's not small compared to the UK, but at the same time comparing to Indonesia, to India, it is smaller. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Minh and Nguyen, for the very helpful presentation on the state of fintech and AI in Vietnam. Coming up, we are having a very exciting panel discussion where UK AI experts will be talking about the trends in AI and how they're applying them to businesses. Now we welcome the participation of Mr. Chang Nachao, Head of Solutions Consulting ASEAN and Korea, BritCham, Mr. Ant Murphy, Head of FinTech at Amplify, Mr. John Burvan, APAC Director at Solidators, Mr. Steve Ackland, CEO at AIM Limited. Moderated by Dr. Chris Moore, we will take a few moments for each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, then discussing questions that draw out some of the trends we should consider. Finally, we open up the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you've been thinking about. Let's get started and welcome these panel discussions.
Thanks, Fee. And I also want to say thank you to Dr. Nguyen. It's a fantastic introduction to the Vietnamese environment from an AI perspective. So what I'd like to do now is just ask each of the participants in the panel to say in just a couple of minutes who they are and to summarize what their company does. And perhaps we could start with Ant Murphy from Amplify. Ant, could you say a little bit about your company and about who you are?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So yeah, I'm Ant Murphy. I'm head of FinTech at Amplify. Previously, I was head of AI at the Royal Bank of Scotland and worked on various transformation and digital transformation projects across that bank in the 11 years I was there, including projects in capital management, portfolio management, and restructuring. Now Amplify is a company that utilizes natural language processing and machine learning and takes high quality structured information and combines it with unstructured information to give fresh insights to our clients in a multitude of sectors. My focus is in financial services, obviously, but we work across many sectors.
Thanks, Ant. Perfect. And if we could pass on to Jay Nijal from BritCham, just to say a little bit about what BritCham does and to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Jay. I look after the solution consulting team for ASEAN and Korea. Very excited to be here. So BritCham is actually the pioneer of robotic process automation. And as I guess the biggest export of that from the UK of that software category. We're very proud of creating a multi-billion-dollar software category, a new software category, and look forward to discussing with you how we can leverage both a combination of RPA and AI to drive real business outcomes related to business and digital transformation.
Thanks, Jay. And if we could now move on to John Burvan from Solidators to say a little bit about the company and to introduce himself as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm John Burvan. Firstly, thank you very much for having me to speak this afternoon. I'm the head of Solidators in Asia. I've been in Asia for 6.5 years now. And before Solidators, I was at State Street for 18 years. Solidators opened our office in January last year. And we help to model complexity to give the foundation, if you like, for AI platforms. So we can either model complex business flows or complex data flows.
Thanks very much, John. And if we could, to complete the lineup, ask Steve Ackland from AIM to introduce himself and say a little bit about what AIM Limited does.
So good afternoon, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. And likewise, I'd like to echo thanks to the department and to the Chamber of Commerce for inviting me on today. Steve Ackland, I'm CEO of AIM, and AIM is essentially an ex-PricewaterhouseCoopers group who broke away to start looking at how we could actually implement business change and greater automation. And over the last few years, of course, with the rise of new disruptive technology, we have been building solutions which leverage and optimize what's available now in the market in all those AI areas to the benefit of driving out particularly regulatory controls in an organization, which we take the view are equally, if not more important than some of the applications of AI. And I think we'll have a little bit of chat around that later, around what that involves. We have several products in the market which are geared to this and also geared obviously to automation and to ensuring digital transformation for organizations who are on that journey. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks very much, Steve. And now if we go back to Ant from Amplify, and Ant, the question I had for you was really around how can AI help businesses develop their strategy? So a chance to talk a little bit more about what Amplify does.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So look, strategy is shaped by understanding the dynamics of your industry, where your business fits within that, the needs of your customer, understanding the risks and opportunities relating to your business, and trying to understand how your sector will develop from a technological standpoint. Traditionally, understanding these dynamics is complex, and people rely on four main ways of obtaining the information. Firstly, structured data, so sort of financial performance information, sector performance indicators, etc. Secondly, customer and sector expert interactions. Then you've got internal research teams, and then finally you've got consultancy reports or consultancy engagements, and that tends to be a combination of structured information and sector knowledge from the engagements. In each of these solutions, weaknesses exist because you can only have a limited number of engagements, as can consultants, and research is limited by the amount of information one person or team can consume. AI has removed the limitations in these methods. So structured data is hugely useful for understanding trends, but it only accounts for less than 5% of all data. More than 95% of all data is unstructured, such as websites, news, academic reports, patents, industry journals, etc. By using this data, applying context and sentiment and quantifying the trends, you can utilize this information to obtain insights into your chosen topics. The problem is that until now, analysing and making sense of this unstructured data at scale is beyond even the largest teams. At Amplify, we've developed products that combine gold standard structured information about companies and sectors and marry it with high quality insights derived from unstructured data using natural language processing and machine learning, as I explained earlier. Our clients use this information in a variety of ways. So for example, a large UK bank lends money in over 30 sectors and uses our products to track each one of those sectors. They assess the risks and opportunities in each sector, assess the growth companies and those companies that are likely to soon experience financial distress. These outputs ensure they have the very latest information at their fingertips and allow them to dynamically shape sector appetite and sector policy, but it also allows their strategic priorities to be fed through to customer-facing staff, and that ensures that when interacting with clients, the relationship managers can add real value to clients and earn trusted advisor status. Another bank's using our technology to understand how banking products are evolving globally with a view to bringing innovation from other countries into their home market. So our technology isn't limited by location or language. And if we find a small banking innovation that's helping commercial customers in, say, Ghana, there's no reason this can't be applied in another market. We'll identify the opportunity, assess it for the bank, and then give the bank the companies and innovators that are involved or could potentially be involved so they can take it forward to assess whether it can work for them. So the impact of AI on strategy is considerable, and some companies are already benefiting from the new insights and connections that are being surfaced from the new technology. Our products have helped businesses to reduce costs, which is critical in the current climate, but we can also increase revenues and help businesses to assess risks in a more effective way.
Thanks very much, Ant. And I'm very interested to hear that you're using natural language processing and addressing the unstructured data. I think that's been a challenge in the industry for quite a long time, but over the last few years, we've seen companies like yours come to the fore and really be able to turn this around and accept and address the unstructured data issue. Okay, thank you. Can I now turn to Jay and BritCham? And Jay, I wanted to ask you about how businesses actually begin their journey when in looking at application of AI technologies. And I'd be interested to hear about some use cases from you in terms of how BritCham has looked at this.
Perfect. So I guess a lot of companies during their first phase or their wave one kind of deployments, Actually, they start with traditional robotic process automation use cases, working with structured data, working with the different applications, and replacing those human element with the digital worker or a robot, to keep it simple. So for example, a financial services institution in Vietnam, they started their BritCham automation journey in loan disbursements, or giving money to the people when they apply for loans, and in customer support processes. Now, their primary focus was actually in saving time or returning hours back to the operation teams and reducing the error rates that are typical in human-centric processes. Now, as companies mature in their automation journey, they look for AI and high impact processes where AI capabilities exist today. They look for major providers like Google, Microsoft, AWS, IBM Watson, even China from Huawei or Tencent AI, or even niche local vendors, Trusted Social, for example. Now, these impacts that they're looking for could be based on cost savings, time savings, customer experience, or regulatory burdens, as Steve Ackland alluded to. So a couple of use cases come to mind. So if you're familiar with LIBOR, or the London Interbank Offered Rate, which is coming to an end, and the whole globe is transitioning next year and the year after. So one of our global investment firm customers had to comb through over 9,000 contracts that could potentially have references to these LIBOR rates. Now, internally, they estimated that it would roughly cost about 800,000 USD in labor costs to manually perform this exercise of going through those different contracts. Now, one of the challenges was also some of the contracts were scanned images. So what they deployed was a combination of RPA and AI technologies to tackle this specific problem. So they used computer vision to convert those images into text, machine learning and natural language processing, so NLP for short, to train roughly around 60 search terms and keywords to enable them to automatically find these contracts that were referencing these LIBOR rates. Now, if a human was going to do that particular activity on their own, it would take them 30 minutes to go through each document one by one, all right? 30 minutes per document. Now, with the solution from BritCham and a combination of AI, we actually saved them around 4,500 hours, which is equivalent to around 563 working days. But more importantly, all the contracts were reviewed within the 2-month period. So they finished their deployment in July 2020 this year. So they could facilitate these contract renegotiations much, much earlier with their clients. Now, another example of AI at work, this time in a regulatory landscape. So the challenge is specifically around compliance screening for corporate filing documents at 2 stock exchanges based in Greater China. So regularly, companies have to submit their corporate filing documents to the exchange where they're listed. And now these documents come in their own formats. They're very unstructured. And they had these exchanges had a human workforce that typically had to go through thousands of these filings that were submitted. And for each of these filings, they had to find and take out each of the shareholder names that were listed and detailed in these documents. Now, for each shareholder name, they had to, perform sanction screen checks, check if they were on blacklists, check if they had criminal records, check if they had previous penalties. And so we automated this process using RPA and in combination with machine learning and a subset of NLP, natural language processing, called entity extraction. Now, an additional challenge was these documents were both in English and in Chinese. So using this combination of technology for making up the solution, these exchanges were able to automatically find all these shareholder names from all these different filing documents. And they actually timed it. It was actually 6 times faster than a human being to actually find those names from within those documents. And it was actually 20% more accurate in finding all the names in the documents as compared to letting a human using their own logics to be able to find those names. So obviously by automating this process, they were able to avoid huge penalties or fines from either local or international regulators if they were found dealing with these kind of blacklisted or sanctioned individuals. So those are the two at the top of mind that come to me, Dr. Chris, around this area.
Jay, thank you very much. And those numbers really speak volumes, don't they? 9,000 contracts and an $800,000 saving, that's immense. And I think it's also interesting, as we've heard now from both and from Jay, about different components of AI. So AI is multiple pieces that act together. So natural language processing, computer vision, the entity extraction piece, as well as the fundamentals of machine learning. So thanks, Jay. Okay, let me turn now to John from Solidatus. Now, Solidatus is a company that offers data analytics solutions. So I would be very interested, John, to hear about what problems can you address using your data science solutions, and particularly in terms of a Vietnamese market, because I understand that you've already got customers in Vietnam. So, John.
Thank you very much, Chris. So I think the most common or famous phrase I hear on a regular basis in both the data space and the AI space is garbage in, garbage out. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So for AI to really work well, it needs to have the best possible inputs into the decisions it's going to make, or the outputs that are going to be derived. And so a lot of organizations are running into AI without really doing this extremely important groundwork to make sure that they're doing the right things or using the right things to get the right output. So knowing what you have, where it is, how it gets there and where it goes to is really key within an organization. The data flows or data lineage, which is what Solidatus does. So we aim to build an operational blueprint of all of your data flows, and to, a bit like Google Maps, to crowdsource the collection of that information and the updating of that within the organization. And so what we do is we then reuse that for things like regulation, so that we know that we're reporting the right data, for transformation, so that we can take the risk out of digital transformation, so that we govern our data and our processes correctly, and to improve the data quality. And having the right data can avoid issues with regulators, shareholders, and also make sure that our most valuable asset after our people is used in the best way possible. In fact, acquiring this information can be really hard and difficult. For BCBS 239, 50% of compliance is in data lineage alone. And our experience with Vietnamese customers is that their systems, as Dr. Nguyen touched on, are often a little bit more nascent. So there's less to actually map, which means that it's much easier to do it. So if you have this competitive advantage and you can reduce the risk around changing your systems, it's going to become very easy to catch up on those that are perhaps a little bit further ahead, and to be more dynamic in deploying these technical solutions. And very often we might start with regulation and AML to start to reuse that. Or as Jay said, it could be the IBOR change coming up. Now we've touched on client contracts, but if you think about IBOR, every single system you have in a financial service organization that is based on money and the value of money, which is an interest rate, is going to have to know where every IBOR rate is in every system, every spreadsheet, every application, and change that on one day. We can help you to do that, to find it, and to start reusing this information so that you really reduce the costs in these projects, and apply it to other areas that you might want to save money. So, being at the heart of a data strategy was really why we've just had an investment from Citibank and are at the heart of their process now.
Thanks, John. And I think it's very interesting, as you mentioned, that if you start off with data that isn't great, then you're never ever going to get a great outcome no matter how good the AI tools are. So starting at the beginning and really making sure that the data input is really of the best quality, and the approaches you take is clearly very important here. Okay, thank you. Just then to move on to Steve Ackland at AIM Limited. We haven't really talked about the regulatory and compliance environment yet, and clearly AI does have some opportunities here to help businesses. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of your perspective from AIM about that.
Yes, thanks, Chris. So I'd like to build probably on my colleagues on the panel, really, in terms of the areas that they're looking at, and to sort of extend that to the angle that we're coming at it from. So a few years back, as I mentioned, we started looking at solutions and how we could build new technology and disruptive technology into greater automation and business change. And we went into the regulatory technology arena principally because we saw it as a highly underinvested area in terms of technology, and therefore, being quite honest, fewer competitors. But what we also saw was really a need in all organisations, whether they're private, public, government, to have technology tools which could help them build or be more smarter, more agile, and have more controlled in their operational approach. And as we well know, organisations who are able to do this are the ones who do best. They flourish. They have a longer longevity. But reg tech or regulatory technology is not just about sort of corporate governance and making sure your organisation is compliant with legislation, regulation, and avoiding penalties. And although that, of course, is important, it's also about a range of different other areas. So, for example, it's about making sure that your organisation is transparent, particularly important if you are in financial services, generating new opportunities and benefits. And how do you do that? That's largely through things such as increased market confidence. So the heart of any organisation really is its data, and my colleagues have also voiced the importance of data. And data, therefore, being a key resource for control, is therefore very much a target for regulatory technology. And that's certainly the angle that we have taken, as I mentioned. But by that, obviously, you do need to understand your data, and understanding your data, your DNA, what you have, what it is, how you use it, is absolutely key to digital transformation. That tells you how and what your organization really is about. And before you actually can proceed along that journey, we're very clear with customers that you really need to understand your data and the DNA of that data to be successful. So what we've done at AIM is to develop some software tools which allow that digital transformation to be encapsulated within a regulatory technology approach. And we have two products. One is called Data Belt, and the other one is called Data Serve. Data Belt is a platform which really is about looking at structured and unstructured data. So again, my colleagues have explained what they're doing, and we're similar in that sense, in that we have a system which creates a virtualized data lake through an indexer and classification engine. So it can tell you exactly across your data estate what you have, where it is, what its classification is. And we've packed it full of AI tools. So we've got, for example, machine learning using algorithms. We have robotic processing. We have an open API economy underpinning it, so that the system can actually link through and connect to any other system. We have natural language programming or processing, as others have said, to make it easy. You don't have to have a fully developed developer team who can actually run the system, and also deployable on blockchain. And the idea is to automate as much of this analysis as we can, all from within the one system. The idea being that the Data Belt is a one platform governance tool whereby you can not only discover, analyze, but also to remediate data. And as you quite rightly say, in terms of the garbage in, garbage out, whatever organization you're in, data on the whole is not in a great situation. And cleanliness, quality is always top of the list in terms of actually therefore understanding what questions you may want to ask of it to make sure that your answers are meaningful and realistic. So by understanding your data and getting it, understanding its classification, its relevance to you as an organization, what classification is, for example, in terms of other things like data protection and cyber security, then you really have a good idea of what you're about, and therefore how your data transformation strategy should take place and operate. A DataServe platform is a next generation multi-channel tool which uses AI and cognitive software. So we mentioned about chatbots, which as Chris had said previously, very big in the UK. And what we're doing with that is to bring together legacy systems and modern systems, creating a shared service ecosystem where required, improving the digital journeys for users. And most importantly, and very recently with COVID-19, the ability for organizations to go remote and react quickly to events as they develop. And we've done an awful lot of this with education, which of course has suffered with students not being able to get into class due to restrictions on travel. So we've done an awful lot around there in terms of those tools. And these tools work together. They're part of our data estate suite, and they're fully integrated and will give you an overall view, test the temperature of your data, of your digital transformation, and all the areas that you need to go forward with when you're actually coming up with your program. And just to say a little bit around investment, we always make sure our costs are kept low, and we offer these through an annual running cost subscription process, and they can be on cloud or premise, whichever suits anybody. And we're conscious, particularly in this sector in Vietnam, the need to reduce any impact on capital spend. And just to say that we're also very interested in partnering with any organisation who's interested in looking at these tools and coming up with how we can drive out new opportunities for them and new revenue streams as a result of this. And in terms of where we've worked in the area, in the region, in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. We're also operating in India. And we, like my colleagues, not only do we do financial services organisations, but also logistics and healthcare, insurance, marketing, fast-moving consumer goods, government, and as I mentioned, education. And the tools are increasingly used for counter-fraud purposes as well. So we're very interested in widening our footprint, our remit within Vietnam and the wider ASEAN region, of course, and obviously be delighted to speak with anybody there or organisation who are interested in working with us. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Steve. That's great, and it clearly does show that when you're looking at applying AI solutions and you're looking at data analytics, there are a number of different things you have to think about at the same time, as you illustrated in your presentation. Okay, there are a few questions that have come through. I wanted to join some of these together, but there are some which are looking in terms at how small and medium-sized businesses can use AI and also the cost of doing that. Can I just start back with you, Steve, since you're on screen right now? In terms of the model that you have to work with small and medium-sized businesses, clearly to acquire some of that expertise in-house, if you were going to go out and recruit a data scientist or an AI specialist, is very expensive. But in terms of the way that you work with small and medium-sized businesses and offer a cost-effective route, how does that work for you from AIM's point of view?
We work with large multinationals down to SMEs, and it's important to us that we recognise that every organisation, every vertical has data needs and is embarking on a data transformation journey at some point. So we offer very competitive and, where necessary, customised approaches depending on the region, depending on the organisation. It may well be the organisation we really want to work with, or we see, some echoes and cultural alignment with our approach. So we're very keen on doing that. And like I said, we do make sure that we have any financial propositions which are very much in keeping with SMEs. The SMEs get the same service that you would if you were a tier one. And that's very, very important to us to make sure, again, that we have customers who really get great value out of these tools and our services, and our data scientists, obviously, who will support that as much as a tier one who obviously is in a position possibly to pay more for that sort of service. So you get that one approach. The service and the products although they are largely out the box, they also do come with development platforms. And again, we always take great pride in making sure that we can support the local team, SME or tier one, in understanding how they can actually use those tools in different ways. And as I said, it's very important. It's not just about control and regulation and compliance. It's also about generating new opportunities. And we've worked with now many companies when we were going through our analysis and putting our tools together. We work with many organizations, different sizes, from the giant card payment providers and banks down to smaller SMEs. And the thing that has always been important to us has been the need to make sure that the tool enables each organization to get what they want out of it, but it can also be used to develop new areas and analysis. And every single week almost we get new ways in which the tools can be used, data can be used for greater analysis. One recently was around what people think of us, so net promoter score. How can we use our structured and unstructured data to get a view on what people think of us? So whether that's internally looking or externally through open source data, what do people think? Are we likely to get all those renewals? Are we a good bet if perhaps we're going through some sort of private equity investment, or we're going through an M&A sell or buy activity? So again, all sorts of applications, all through the fact that you actually have this data there. As long as you make sure it's compliant and clean, then you're in a good position to get really good insight and answers to your questions.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So can I turn now to Jay and ask about how you work with SMEs and how you can help SMEs to adopt these kinds of technologies?
So actually, SMEs form an interesting question, because they feel that AI and RPA is out of reach for them, because they think it's expensive or it's hard to implement. But in actual fact, a lot of the AI technologies are very easily available at a very competitive pricing, especially if you look at the major commercial cloud providers from Microsoft or Google. If you talk about a transaction that leverages AI, for example, it could be in the 0.001 cent per transaction. For example, if you want to leverage computer vision from Microsoft, it's around $1 for 1,000 transactions. So it's very easy to get to start with AI, and they have a lot of free tiers as well. So leverage that thing to try to fail fast and innovate. So that's my advice to the SMEs. Okay, thank you.
Can I turn now to Ant and thinking about opportunities in this kind of market as you take your technologies? You talked in the beginning about the use of natural language processing, machine learning, and all the component technologies. So in terms of specifically looking at Vietnam, what would you think are some of the opportunities in the Vietnamese market?
So I previously outlined the possibilities in strategy. So we were talking earlier in the call about how Vietnam is fairly early in its life cycle for AI. I would look across the globe and see what else has been done. I think that's important, and trying to understand the data that's out there, both on a structured and unstructured basis, to form your own strategy is critical. When I talk about forming your own strategy, it's important that you also focus inside your organization. So focus on your own workforce. Make sure that your people within your organization are comfortable with AI, what it's doing, how it can help them, and it's not something to be scared of. So I would focus in-house as well as going outside. But when you look outside, I would look at strategy, I would look at data. The truth is, if you look at a Vietnamese bank, it faces exactly the same challenges as, say, a UK bank, where you're trying to, especially in the current environment, identify distress as quickly as possible so you can take the swiftest possible action in order to put yourself in the best possible position from a capital perspective. So all those sorts of opportunities that we're helping organizations with in the UK, identifying customers, identifying distress, they exist in Vietnam as well, and I would encourage people to look at those use cases and do something swiftly in that regard, because to points that have previously been made, I think some of these products are accessible from a cost point of view as well. And a lot of the development's already been done.
Thanks, Anne. That's great. And I think artificial intelligence has the reputation of being expensive technology, but in reality, if you take those first few steps, it can be much, much more cost effective. And as we've heard several times today, the benefits by applying machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision are enormous. And I think it's just a way, it's just helping companies and organizations find a route to get started. And talking about the getting started piece, I just wanted to turn back to John at Solidatus, because John was talking about the importance of data. And I'm thinking now, as we go into an environment which is post-COVID, and companies are now going to be more and more aware of their digital transformation journeys, that digital transformation is an important part for the business and for the future. But what would you recommend to them to get started in terms of that digital transformation journey?
Yeah, and I think, following COVID, costs are absolutely key to all organisations. Bottom lines have taken huge hits, and what that really means is probably two things. One is going to be a further compression on cost, and the other means that there's going to be more pressure on driving revenue. In order to drive that revenue, having the best data insights is going to be absolutely fundamental to having the best information available to form the best decisions. In terms of bottom line, the only feasible way for me that you can do that is to maximize the resources that you have. And the best way to do that is through digital transformation. And I think we're starting to see a lot of businesses look to do both of those things more aggressively, or at least those that are going to come out of this in a stronger shape. And it's a horrible phrase, but not to let a good crisis go to waste kind of has some bearing here, I think. So I think Dr. Nguyen touched on the cost control, having the sufficiency in systems, being able to reduce, to be able to maximize that transformation, comes about from having an operational blueprint of your organization, which we can do. And just as if you want to make a change to your house, you don't knock down a wall without checking that plan, the same with making changes to your systems. And we can help not just to model your current systems and how they would evolve into future systems, but we can also help you to understand, if you are making a change, what impact that will have, so that you're asking the right questions and you're reducing or removing the risk from making those changes. And very often we see organisations get this wrong. From a UK perspective, we could look at Lloyd's TSB and the disaster they had with their large transformation as an example.
Thanks very much, John. And I guess we're getting quite close to the end of the session time. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you for the insights from Ant, from Jay, from John, and from Steve. I would urge the audience to get in touch with Phi and the team in Ho Chi Minh City to move forward the conversations. Clearly, you've heard from some great businesses today, businesses that have got solutions that are ready to go, that are accessible, that are affordable for a very broad range of organizations in Vietnam. And ultimately, we in DIT would like to support those engagements going forward between Vietnamese businesses and the UK companies that you've heard from today. And at that point, I'm now going to say thank you to everybody for participating this morning and turn it back to Phi for some final closing words. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the really interesting panel discussions where the concerns about especially SMEs are addressed. And I think that wraps up our webinar today. On behalf of the Department for International Trade and the British Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, I would like to say thank you all for making time in your busy schedule to join us here this afternoon. And it's been my pleasure to organize this webinar, and I wish you all a pleasant day. Again, one more time, if you're keen to learn more, this is a good time as London Tech Week is happening. London Tech Week is one of the biggest and boldest tech festivals in Europe, and this year it will be fully virtual, and you can dial in for free from home. You can join via www.londontechweek.com/events, or you can follow us at UK in Vietnam and at BritCham of Commerce Vietnam to stay up to date with all the events. Otherwise, again, thank you very much, and I hope you will have a happy national holiday with your friend and family.
Thanks, Fee. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Well done.
What do you think? What do you think?
Excellent.
I think it is less people than we expected, right?
Yeah, but you know, you can never predict these things. And, yeah, it's a good experience to have, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really good experience to have.
Yeah, so we'll do more of these, and we'll kind of know a little bit more next time round. But